This section covers Daniel 11:31-39. We will explain the 1260-year period, which was from 538 to 1798. This is also the time of the beast of the sea of Revelation 13. 538 to 1798. Daniel 11:31. And forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress, then they shall take away the daily sacrifices, and place there the abomination of desolation. The king of the north is shifting from a civil power using the church to achieve its goals to a church using civil power to achieve its goals. The sanctuary fortress is the Christian church. The forces shall be mustered by him as the civil powers. Kings, that enforce the teachings of the papacy. The daily sacrifices referred to in this verse in Hebrew means continuance. This is talking about the continual ministry of Jesus in the heavenly sanctuary. He is always there to forgive the sins of the repentant believers. The earthy apostate medieval church has usurped this duty by having the priest hear confessions and give forgiveness. This church has taken the place of the relationship every child of God must have with their heavenly Father. Daniel 11:32. Those who do wickedly against the covenant he shall corrupt with flattery, but the people who know their God shall be strong. During the 16th century, Protestant reformers such as Martin Luther and John Calvin argued that the medieval Christian church had become corrupt and had lost its way, due in part to the use of flattery. These reformers believed that church leaders had become too focused on accumulating power, wealth, and influence, rather than on serving the needs of their congregations. They argued that church officials used flattery to gain favor with rulers and other powerful figures, in order to secure their own positions and further their own interests. According to the reformers, this focus on flattery had led the church astray, causing it to lose sight of its true mission and to become corrupted by worldly concerns. They believed that the church needed to return to a simpler, more humble form of worship, and to refocus on the spiritual needs of its members, rather than on accumulating power and wealth. The Protestant Reformation, by Hans J. Hillerbrand, New York, HarperCollins, 2007, pages 31-33. The phrase people who know their God described the Waldenses and the reformer like Wycliffe. These believed that their relationship with God gave them strength and enabled them to perform great deeds. They saw themselves as being chosen by God for a special purpose, and felt a strong sense of calling to share their faith with others. A Christian movement that emerged in around the 6th century in southern France and northern Italy emphasized the importance of living a simple and humble life, and rejected many of the rituals and practices of the medieval Catholic Church. Despite facing persecution and opposition from the Church, they remained committed to their faith and believed that God was with them. By the 12th century they were known as the Waldenses and were persecuted and martyred by the Papal Church for their beliefs in biblical truths. Similarly, John Wycliffe was a 14th century English theologian and reformer who challenged the authority of the Catholic Church and called for a return to the teachings of the Bible. He believed that God had called him to preach the truth and to expose the corruption and excesses of the Church. Despite facing significant opposition and persecution, he remained steadfast in his convictions and inspired many others to follow in his footsteps. Deuteronomy 4:13. And he declared unto you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, even 10 commandments, and he wrote them upon 2 tables of stone. The phrase those who do wickedly against the covenant. These are they who remove the command against idol worship and change the day of worship. The phrase many days is the 1260 years prophetic period. This was from 538 AD till 1798 AD, and Revelation 12:6 it discusses this time period. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1260 days. In the Bible, a woman represents Israel or God's church. Jeremiah 6:2 I have likened the daughter of Zion to a comely and delicate woman. Daniel 11:33. And those of the people who understand shall instruct many, yet for many days they shall fall by sword and flame, by captivity and plundering. During the Dark Ages, many Christians who refused to adhere to the teachings and practices of the Catholic Church were persecuted and martyred. They faced various forms of persecution, including being put to death by sword and flame, being taken captive, and having their property plundered. Those who were put to death by sword and flame were often accused of heresy or blasphemy, and were typically burned at the stake or beheaded. This was seen as a way to punish and intimidating those who dared to challenge the authority of the Church. Others were taken captive and forced to renounce their beliefs or face further persecution. Many were imprisoned, tortured, and subjected to other forms of mistreatment in an effort to break their spirit and force them to conform to the church's teachings. In addition to physical persecution, many Christians during this time had their property and possessions seized by the church or by other authorities. This was often done as a way to punish them for their beliefs, or to pressure them into abandoning their faith. Despite facing such persecution, many martyrs remained steadfast in their faith and refused to renounce their beliefs. They saw themselves as standing up for the truth and for what they believed was right, even in the face of great danger and hardship. Their courage and faith continue to inspire people today. Daniel 11:34. Now when they fall, they shall be aided with a little help, but many shall join with them by intrigue. God repeatedly sent his sorely pressed people a little help in the person of leaders who spoke forth in the darkness, the Waldensians, Wycliffe, Huss, Luther and others during the bitter 1,260 years of apostasy and persecution. Daniel 11:35. And some of those of understanding shall fall, to refine them, purify them, and make them white, until the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time. The phrase those of understanding shall fall, to refine them, purify them, and make them white is also described in Revelation 6:9-11. And when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God, and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them, that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren, that should be killed as they were, should be fulfilled. Describing persecution until appointed time. In Revelation 12:6 And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days, for the appointed time, specific time. In 538 the Bishop of Rome was given civil and religious authority in Rome, indicating the beginning of the 1,260-year period. In 1798 the Pope was taken captive by Napoleon's general, and his civil authority was taken away, indicating the end of the 1,260 years period of papal domination. Shall fall, to refine them, purify them, and make them white, until the time of the end. This text tells us the time of the end began at the appointed time when papal power ended in 1798. Daniel 11:36. Then the king shall do according to his own will, he shall exalt and magnify himself above every god, shall speak blasphemies against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the wrath has been accomplished, for what has been determined shall be done. Then the king shall do according to his own will. During the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church was the dominant religious and political institution in Europe. During this time, the Pope was seen as the supreme authority in matters of religion, and many European rulers looked to the Pope for guidance on political matters as well. In particular, the period from the 11th to the 13th centuries is sometimes referred to as the period of papal monarchy, as the Pope exercised significant temporal power over much of Europe. During this time, the Pope was able to exert his influence through a combination of spiritual and temporal authority, and was able to exercise considerable control over both secular and religious leaders. What is blasphemies? John 10:33. The Jews answered him, saying, For a good work we stone thee not, but for blasphemy, and because that thou, being a man, makest thyself God. And in Matthew 9:2. And, behold, they brought to him a man sick of the palsy, lying on a bed, and Jesus seeing their faith said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee. Matthew 9:3. And, behold, certain of the scribes said within themselves, This man blasphemeth. Blasphemy, therefore, is a man claiming to be God, or a man claiming to forgive sins. Both of these things were done during the Middle Ages by the Roman Catholic Church or the Pope. The phrase, shall prosper till the wrath has been accomplished, for what has been determined shall be done. God gives freedom, but there are limits. We have freedom in USA, but there are limits. At the end of the 1,260-year prophecy in 1798 the end came for papal dominance over civil power. Daniel 11:37 He shall regard neither the God of his fathers nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall exalt himself above them all. The phrase the God of his fathers indicating that this king will not follow the religious practices of the apostles. Similarly, the phrase the desire of women could either indicate celibacy or homosexual tendencies. Another interpretation would be to take the symbolic meaning of women as churches. In this case he would disregard the needs of God's people to hear a true gospel. The verse goes on to say that this king will not regard any god, indicating that he will not follow any religious tradition or acknowledge any deity. Instead, he will exalt himself above them all, implying that he will see himself as the ultimate authority and ruler, not subject to any higher power. He shall exalt himself above them all. The Pope has full, supreme, and universal power over the whole Church, a power which he can always exercise unhindered. That, in brief, as stated in their catechism, the Pope enjoys, by divine institution, supreme, full, immediate, and universal power in the care of souls. This means that the situation of the Pope is similar to that of an absolute monarch or the leader of a fascist state. Daniel 11:38. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold, and silver, and with precious stones, and pleasant things. The phrase he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not. One such man is Thomas Aquinas, who states in his Summa Theologica, Volume 4, page 90, top theologian like Augustine. Though heretics must not be tolerated because they deserve it, we must bear with them, till, by a second admonition, they may be brought back to the faith of the Church. But those who, after a second admonition, remain obstinate in their errors, must not only be excommunicated, but they must be delivered to the secular power to be exterminated. And again, so far as heretics are concerned, heresy is a sin, whereby they deserve not only to be separated from the Church by excommunication, but also to be severed from the world by death. Volume 2, 154. If you ever seen the Vatican, you know they honor gold and silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. Daniel 11:39. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. The face strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. The veneration of Mary as a prominent figure in Catholic teachings dates back to the early centuries of Christianity. However, the specific doctrines and practices surrounding Mary developed gradually over time. The early Church Fathers, such as St. Augustine and St. Jerome, wrote extensively about Mary's role in the Incarnation and her virtues as a model of faith and obedience. The development of specific doctrines related to Mary, such as the Immaculate Conception and the Assumption, took place over centuries and were the result of theological debates and the influence of popular devotion. The Immaculate Conception, which teaches that Mary was conceived without the stain of original sin, was defined as a dogma by Pope Pius IX in 1854. The Assumption, which teaches that Mary was taken up into heaven body and soul, was defined as a dogma by Pope Pius XII in 1950. Today, Mary is considered by Catholics to be the Mother of God and the Queen of Heaven, and she is venerated through various prayers and devotions, such as the Rosary and the Litany of Loreto. Mary is also an important figure in Catholic art and culture, and her feast days are celebrated throughout the liturgical year. The Queen of Heaven in Jeremiah 7:18 was a pagan goddess. Divide the land for gain. During the 16th century, there were instances where the practice of simony, which is the buying and selling of church offices, occurred within the Catholic Church, including the papacy. While this practice was not limited to the 16th century, it was a significant issue during the period leading up to the Protestant Reformation. One example of simony during this time was the sale of indulgences, which were certificates that could be purchased to reduce the amount of punishment a person would have to endure in purgatory. The sale of indulgences was controversial and widely criticized, and it played a role in the development of the Protestant Reformation. Another example of simony was the practice of reservation, in which the Pope would reserve the right to appoint bishops to certain dioceses, and then sell these appointments to the highest bidder. This practice was widely criticized and viewed as a form of corruption within the Church. One of the causes of the French Revolution was the greed of the Church leaders, and people could no longer tolerate the power-loving clergy. Daniel 11:30. For the ships of Kittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved, and return, and have indignation against the holy covenant, so shall he do, he shall even return, and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. The prophecy in the 11th of Daniel has nearly reached its complete fulfillment. Much of the history that has taken place in fulfillment of this prophecy will be repeated. In the 30th verse a power is spoken of that shall be grieved, and return, and have indignation against the holy covenant, so shall he do, he shall even return, and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. Verses 31 to 36 of Daniel 11 are quoted. This statement is found in 13 manuscript release page 394.1. The phrase shall be grieved, and return, and have indignation against the holy covenant, so shall he do, he shall even return, and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. Is therefore interpreted as he being the king of the north will rise again at the end of time in cooperation to those who have forsaken the holy covenant, the law of God. The pattern of events will be similar to what has happened in much of Daniel 11. That is the event since the rise of the apostate Christian church. 1. Corrupting the church by Christian philosophers. 2. Constantine Wars 312-324. 3. Secular Sunday Law 321 AD. 4. Uniting of Church and State 148-538 AD. 5. Religious Sunday Laws issued 380-386 AD. 6. Pope issued Religious and Civil Authority 538 AD. 7. Volcano eruption 536 AD. Climate change. 8. Famine, plague caused 100 million people to die beginning in 541 AD. 9. Church controlling state 538 to 1798 AD. 10. Religious persecution starts 538 AD. 11. Persecution intensifies, maximum dates 1200 to 1400s. 12. Volcano eruption 1276 AD caused climate changes. 13. Famine, plague 200 million died from 1346 to 1353 AD. 14. Rebellion against corrupt church 1798 AD. Notice in this timeline that about the time that the Roman bishop was consolidating his power and persecuting those Christian groups that would not conform to his authority and teachings, there came a massive volcanic eruptions that changed the climate for years afterwards and triggered famines and plagues. This reduced the ability of the apostate church to persecute and annihilate the remnant apostolic churches. And again in the 12th to 14th centuries when papal persecution of nonconforming churches was at its peak, another massive volcanic eruption occurred, possibly the largest volcano on record occurred, and also the worst plague that is on record occurred. This affected the ability of the papal powers to persecute God's people. These events had less effect on the rural areas where God's faithful had fled to. Revelation 12:16 And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth, and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. The Pragmatic Sanction of 535. The Pragmatic Sanction of 535 was a law issued by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I. The law was intended to reform the administration of the Western Roman Empire, which had been conquered by the Ostrogoths in 476. The Pragmatic Sanction of 535 recognized the Bishop of Rome as the head of the Church in the Western Roman Empire. The law also gave the Bishop of Rome the right to appoint bishops in the Western Roman Empire. The Pragmatic Sanction of 535 was a significant document in the history of the papacy. The law helped to establish the authority of the papacy over the Church in the Western Roman Empire. With the authority of the Pragmatic Sanction, given to the Bishop of Rome by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian in 535 AD, the persecution of nonconformists intensified. The Apostolic Remnant Church took refuge in more rural and isolated areas. The Celtic Church, Scotland and the British Isles were resisting the pagan teachings that had come into the Roman Church and did not want to come under the papal authority. The effects of the volcanic-induced ice age and resultant famine and bubonic plague had less effect on the rural and isolated people. This focused the attention of the papacy on dealing with these calamities rather than consolidation their power over the nonconformist Christian groups, thus fulfilling the prophecy of Revelation 12. The earth helped the woman. What might a repeat of the events of Daniel 11:23-39 look like? In this chart I have speculated. 1. False teachings corrupting church. 2. Wars. 3. Secular Sunday law, possibly environmental related. 4. Setting up of image to Rome in Protestant America. 5. Second phase of Sunday laws, religious. 6. National apostasy causes nation ruin. 7. Severe natural disasters. 8. Plague. 9. Church controlling state and Satan appears. 10. Third phase of Sunday laws, persecution. 11. Fourth phase of Sunday laws, persecution and death decree. 12. Extreme natural disasters. 13. 7 last plagues. 14. Rebellion against corrupt church.